On the second Sunday of May, while other mothers were unwrapping scented candles and posing for photos with fresh bouquets, I was barefoot in my kitchen in Maple Hollow, scraping burnt egg off an old cast-iron pan and waiting for my son to say something. Anything, not even a simple Happy Mother's Day came from his lips. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. And when he finally did speak, it broke something inside me so quietly, so cleanly that no one heard the snap. Not even me at first. But that morning, as sunlight slanted across the warped wooden table Robert built with his own two hands, something shifted. And I had no idea it would become the first line of a story I never meant to write. A story not of vengeance in flames, but of quiet reclamation, the kind no one sees coming until it's already done. Before that moment, I was just Margaret Lane, wife to Robert, mother to Ethan. And for the longest time, that was enough. We built everything from scratch, literally. The cabin, the red barn, the fence posts that zigzagged down to the edge of the orchard. We dug the foundation ourselves, blister by blister. Back then money was scarce, but joy was plentiful. Robert used to say, if the land stays rooted, the love will too. When Ethan was born, the soil turned sacred. It stopped being earth and became memory. I rocked him on that groaning porch swing when he had colic, held his handlebars as he wobbled through the apple rows on his first bike, picked ticks from his hair after every sun-drenched summer hike. And when Robert got sick, first quick, then slow, then gone, I stayed. I held everything together with duct tape, casseroles and willpower, paid the taxes, fed the chickens, crawled under sinks to fix burst pipes in the dead of winter. Not once did I ask for help, even when the roof began to sag above our heads. Because I believed foolishly, faithfully, that one day Ethan would come back. Not just in person, but in spirit. That he'd remember this place wasn't just where he grew up. It was where we gave up so much to let him grow. As a child he used to write me notes. "You're the best mom in the world," scrawled in crooked pencil, folded and tucked beneath my pillow like tiny treasures. I kept every single one in a shoebox in the back of my closet, even after he left for college, even after he forgot to call on my birthday. Even after he married a woman who called me Maggie, like we were co-workers sharing a carpool instead of a life. I held on, because mothers hold on until they can't anymore. That was me, before that Sunday morning, before Ethan looked me dead in the eye, with the same hazel eyes I once wiped tears from and said I no longer mattered. I still remember the smell of bacon curling through the air. I'd woken up early, like I always did on Mother's Day, warmed the cinnamon rolls he used to devour as a boy, even set out his favorite navy blue mug, the one with the chipped handle he always reached for. I was trying. After all these years I was still trying. He arrived late. Vanessa trailed behind him talking on her phone with her sunglasses still on. The grandkids barreled in, eyes locked on their tablets, already arguing about who got which charger. No hugs. No flowers. No hi grandma. Ethan dropped his keys on the counter and said, "You didn't have to cook, Mom. We're grabbing lunch with Vanessa's parents anyway." That stung more than I let on, but I smiled, nodded and said, "It's just nice to see you." We sat. They ate fast, like they had somewhere better to be. Vanessa picked at her eggs like she was doing me a favor by showing up. And then it happened, so casually I almost missed. Ethan laughed at something I didn't catch, turned to the friend they'd brought along for the ride, and said, "This place? Oh, it's just Mom's. But not for long. We've got plans for the land once it's transferred." My heart froze mid-beat. I didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared at him. My son, the same boy who once begged me not to leave on his first day of school, was now talking about my home like it was already his. Like I was a tenant waiting for eviction, and then as if twisting the knife with practiced ease, he said it while looking straight at me. "I mean, let's be honest. Mom's kind of past the stage where she can handle all this. She's done her part. She's done her part." As if I were a chapter in a book they'd already finished. As if I didn't belong in the sequel. If you've ever had your entire life reduced to a throwaway comment at a breakfast table, you know what kind of silence follows. It's not rage. Not even heartbreak. It's colder than that. It's the sound of finality. The realization that you were never meant to be the last sentence. That somewhere along the way, they wrote you out. And the worst part, they didn't even notice. I want to hear from the women out there. Those who've been told in so many words or silences that they're done, that their time has passed, that their worth was tied to roles now deemed complete. Because I'm here to tell you, you are not done. You're never done. Not until you decide so. I didn't argue that day. Didn't cry. I simply cleared the dishes. Packed up the leftovers that no one Then I stood in the doorway of that kitchen I once danced barefoot in, watching their car roll away without a glance in the rearview mirror. But I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. No, I was thinking about all that I had given. Every blistered hand, every sleepless night, every unspoken sacrifice. Because the worst part of being erased isn't just vanishing, it's realizing they think they have the right to do it. Like they were entitled to rewrite the ending of my story without even reading the chapter. It didn't fall apart all at once. That's the cruel trick of it. It unraveled slowly, like a frayed thread slipping from a sleeve you didn't notice was coming undone. A week after that Mother's Day, Ethan stopped answering my calls right away. Text became clipped. Busy right now. Can't talk. He wasn't mad. Just unavailable. Like I had been shelved for later, some vague after that never comes. 2 weeks passed. Then Vanessa sent a group text, bubbly and breezy, complete with emojis. Thinking about turning the back acre into a cute little glamping cafe. Rustic vibes. Would be so good for Instagram. My name wasn't even mentioned. Then came the day he arrived. A man in khakis and expensive sunglasses, clipboard in hand, surveying my land like he was at a real estate fair. I watched from the kitchen window, my knuckles white against the sill, as he paced the fields that Robert and I had once sown shoulder to shoulder. His hand pointed casually at the old oak, the one where we'd carved our initials after our first anniversary, like it was just a tree in the way. Not a memory, not sacred. Just an obstacle. Ethan never knocked. Never even looked toward the house. That night, over lukewarm tea, I asked gently, "Are you planning something with the land, sweetheart?" He didn't even glance up from his phone. "It's time we modernize things, Mom. You know, make use of it. Dad always wanted this place to stay in the family." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice not to tremble, because what he really meant was clear as daylight. "You're no longer part of the family we're planning." I had become the furniture, still present, still functional, but invisible in every decision. I was no longer consulted, just there, until I wasn't. Then came Lily's birthday, my youngest granddaughter. I'd spent 2 months sewing her gift, a handmade quilt, every square stitched with care, each one a story. A piece from Ethan's baby blanket, a patch from Robert's flannel, a scrap of the red and white apron I wore every Christmas morning when magic still lived in this house. She opened it, blinked at it, then turned back to her blinking toy kitchen set. Vanessa smiled without warning. "Oh, it's lovely, we'll find a spot for it eventually." Then she added, almost giggling, "She's really into glow-in-the-dark unicorns now." I sat with that quilt in my lap for the rest of the party. No one noticed. No one. Later, alone in the car, I cried. Not because they didn't like it, but because they didn't see it. They didn't see me. That was the moment it crystallized. This wasn't rejection born of malice. It was worse. I was being erased through sheer indifference. Soft, casual indifference, like dust that gathers on a shelf no one uses anymore. And what stung most wasn't that they stopped loving me. It was that they didn't notice they had, and I had let it happen, inch by inch, for the sake of being easy, being accommodated, being the kind of mother who never asks for anything in return. Until one day, I was nothing but a name on a mailbox they intended to repaint. Then one quiet afternoon, while searching the attic for an old recipe box, just something, anything to distract me from the silence, I opened a battered trunk. There, behind Robert's dusty fishing gear and the high school yearbooks, was the fireproof folder, the one he'd always kept in case of emergency. I knelt on the floor, the air thick with dust and sunbeams. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. And there it was. The deed. The land. The home. Every inch of it. Still in my name. Just mine. Not Ethan's. Not shared. Not transfer. For all his talk of what Dad said and how we're modernizing, he never even asked who legally owned it. He just assumed. Like most people do when they think someone is too quiet to matter. And then, as if summoned by memory, I heard Robert's voice. Not in a spooky, ghostly sense. No, just his voice in my head, as vivid as ever. Strong, playful, solid. "If you ever feel like they're fading you out, Maggie, remember you built this place too. You get to decide how the story ends." That sentence wrapped itself around my spine like armor, and for the first time in a long, long while, I began to feel the shift not in the air but in me. That sentence settled inside me like a breeze slipping through a sealed window. Unexpected, bracing, and suddenly clearing the dust I hadn't realized had gathered. I sat there on the attic floor, the deed resting in my lap like a quiet declaration, and finally admitted what I hadn't wanted to say aloud. I wasn't part of their future. Not really. I was a placeholder, a stepping stone, something to nod at before stepping over. They had already moved on. It was only me who'd been clinging to the illusion that we were all still sharing the same life, the same story. That night, I didn't cry. I made a cup of chamomile tea, folded a load of clean laundry, sat by the window and watched the sun melt behind the same row of sugar maples Robert had planted the year Ethan was born. I wasn't angry, just quiet. But this quiet was different from the silence of being ignored. This was the stillness that comes before you know that eerie moment just before a summer storm hits, when the air goes thick and the birds vanish and the wind holds its breath. That's what it felt like inside me. I looked around the house. At the walls Ethan had promised to repaint but never did. At the porch swing no one had sat on in years. At the framed pictures no one had bothered to dust. This wasn't a home for a family anymore. It had become a museum, a memorial to a woman everyone had decided was finished. Forgot. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for someone to notice I was still here. Maybe it was time I started asking myself what I wanted to do with the part of me that still was. Because I hadn't vanished. I hadn't broken. I had just been paused. And now I was ready to press play again. But not on their terms. On mine. I didn't leave in a blaze. I didn't scream or slam any doors. I left like the ocean tide, slow, steady, and absolutely certain. The very next day, I called a real estate agent in the next town over. Her name was Angela Crawley, and she didn't ask a lot of questions. She didn't need to. I want this done quietly, I told her. No signs, no open house, just clean and quiet. 3 weeks later I signed the paper. Willow Haven Farm, 2 acres of sweat, laughter, peeling paint, and sunburned memories sold for $2. The buyers were a retired couple from Colorado named the Mitchells. They loved the land. Promised to keep the apple trees just the way they were. That was enough for me. I didn't tell Ethan, not out of spite, not as revenge, out of clarity, because if he had ever truly been paying attention, he would have already known it was never his. The morning I left I moved through each room slowly, like I was walking through a dream version of my life. I touched the wall in the hallway, the one I painted at midnight while Robert snored in the next room, smoothed the quilt at the foot of the bed, opened the little cabinet above the fridge where I used to hide ginger snaps for Ethan when he was 5. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote him a letter. Just 1 page. Not angry, not dramatic, just the truth. You assumed, Ethan, and I let you. But this home was never promised to you. It was built, cared for, and protected by me. And I've decided to let it go before it becomes something I no longer recognize. You won't find me here. I've chosen to stop waiting to be seen. I'm not disappearing, I'm just becoming. I left the letter under the cracked vase on the table, the one he never once noticed. Then I got in my car and drove. The Blue Ridge Mountains welcomed me like an old friend. I found a tiny cottage perched near Lake Wren, with a porch swing that creaked in all the right ways and shutters faded by time and sun. It had 1 bedroom, just enough for me. I planted lavender in mismatched clay pots, hung Robert's old wind chimes from the eaves. And for the first time in years I sat in silence. That didn't feel like loneliness. I closed the joint account Ethan had access to, opened a new one, quietly mailed a donation to a women's shelter 2 counties over. On the memo line I wrote, "From a friend who finally walked away." Each morning I brewed my own coffee, sat by the window and breathed in the life I had built. Not for a husband, not for a child, not to be admired or remembered, just for me. I didn't post pictures. Didn't update my address, didn't leave clues behind, because no one chases ghosts. And I was done haunting a house that never came looking for me. It took Ethan 3 weeks to notice I was gone. He called twice. I didn't answer. Left a voicemail. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Everything okay?" Then a text. "Heard something about the farm. Call me." I let them sit. No anger, just stillness. And then in the 4th week I heard the crunch of gravel under tires in the drive outside my cottage. I was out by the porch, trimming the lavender I'd planted in those mismatched clay pots, when I heard the familiar rumble of tires grinding over gravel. I looked up, and there he was, Same navy blue truck. Same anxious shoulders hunched forward like a boy afraid of his own weight. He stood at the edge of the gate, one hand resting on the latch, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to open it anymore. I didn't move. I didn't rush. I didn't soften. I just waited. Finally Ethan stepped forward. "You really sold it?" he asked, his voice tight. "I did," I said, not harsh, not cold, just clear. He looked down at his shoes, scuffed like he'd kicked his way through a restless week. "I thought it was mine," he whispered. "I know," I replied. "But you never asked, Ethan. You just assumed." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in what felt like years, he really saw me. Not the hands that baked his birthday cakes. Not the garden I now tended with quiet purpose. Not the soft lines on my face, or the silver in my hair. He saw the woman who raised. "I didn't mean to make you feel forgotten," he said quietly. "But you did," I answered just as softly. "And the thing is, I let you." He walked over and sat on the porch step. "I didn't invite him in. I didn't need to. I didn't expect this," he said after a long pause. "No one ever does," I replied. "No one expects the quiet ones to leave. Not until they already have." We sat there together, saying nothing, while the lake breathed against the shore and the wind moved through the trees. After a while I said, "I'm not angry either. I'm not here to punish you. But I'm also not here to be convenient." He nodded slowly. "So, what now?" I reached into the pocket of my sweater and handed him a small folded envelope. "This explains where the rest of my assets went," I said. "You're not cut out, Ethan, but you're not the center either." He didn't argue, didn't push. He just held the envelope, pressing the crease with his thumb. Before he stood, I asked, "Would you like some tea?" His eyebrows lifted, startled. "Even after all this?" "I'm not bitter," I said with a faint smile. "I'm just careful now." We drank in silence. Chamomile. From my own little garden. 2 cups. 2 people sitting in the quiet aftermath of things unspoken for far too long. When he left there were no hugs. No promises. But as he reached the end of the driveway he turned back once. Just for a second. And for me that was enough. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, and the sky turned a warm kind of gold, I stood by the porch railing. My wind chimes swayed gently in the breeze. The lavender brushed my legs. The garden was blooming. No one knew where I was. Not really. And for the first time in decades I felt seen. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go. Margaret Lane gave everything for her family, her time, her home, and yet like so many women she found herself erased. Not with cruelty but with indifference. The quiet kind of erasure that happens when others assume your sacrifices are part of the furniture. But Margaret's journey is not one of vengeance. It's one of quiet reclamation. It's a powerful reminder that we are never done until we decide we are. If you've ever felt invisible in the very life you built, this story is for you. Let it remind you that your voice still matters. Your story is still unfolding, and it's never too late to choose yourself. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. And before you go, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know which city or country you call home.